And so then we not only do we find that Joseph was someone that was cast into the pit, but then we also know the story with Daniel. That Daniel, because of those who were jealous of what was going on in his life, set up a scheme. And that scheme ended up with him having to be cast into the lion's den. And some translation would tell you that that den had to be a pit because it was something that we find later on in that story that when his betrayers got thrown in, it said before they hit the bottom, that the lions had already gotten to them. So we find that, but for a season, Daniel had to be in that pit. And he had to be in that pit with lions that were trained and designed to do what killed those that were cast into it. And I discovered that when I look at that story, that you find that lions by nature could not do what they wanted to do because somehow God had shut their mouths. That even though he was in the pit, he could see the lions, he could smell the lions, he could hear the lions, but God would not allow the lions to devour him. And I thought about that how many of us have been in situations that should have gone a whole nother way? How many of us have had illnesses that should have gone another way? How many of us, even some of us on our jobs, should have been fired and everybody was around you waiting for it to happen, but God shut it down so that it wouldn't be carried out according to plan? Because you find that Daniel's lion's pit was something peculiar because God let them design it. God didn't stop them from designing the scheme. He didn't even stop it from the scheme to be carried out, that he be thrown into that lion's den. But some of us, when we get in the midst of our situations, we think because God allowed us to get there, that because we're allowed to get there, that it's going to prosper. This is why when we look at that scripture that says, when God tells them in Isaiah, he says that no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper. It's funny, but when you look at the preceding verses, he said, they're gathering, but it's not by me. That even though Israel's enemies were doing what they knew to do against the nation, he said, but don't you be afraid of it, because even though they're being gathered together, it's not by my design. So that because they're getting together on their own accord, according to what they know, according to what's in their mind, he said, it's not going to prosper. Oftentimes we fear people. And we fear their position and their power, not understanding that if God does not design it, it's not going to prosper. Because we can say, they're talking about me. And we can know it. And we can say, well, they have already said they're going to do this to me. They've already said, they've already put it on paper that this is how they're going to do these things against me. But he told Israel, but it's not by me, so it won't prosper. But oftentimes we crawl back because we see the armies forming. We hear the gossip. We hear the talk. We see what has happened to other people, and we'll think because it happened to them, because it didn't work right for them, it's not going to work right for me. But he had to tell Israel because the nation was already taking over other nations. So Israel only had in their mind, well, if God is allowing this to happen to them, then surely it's got to happen to us. But he said, it's not by me. And I don't know who in particular I'm talking to, but somebody's standing in the middle of something right now. And you've judged your situation. And you said, well, somebody else got sick and died. Maybe I'm going to get sick and die. Somebody else done lost their job. Somebody else lost their house. Somebody else's children is going haywire. And if I've seen it happen to them and God has allowed it to happen to them, then surely it's going to come to me. But you got to know in your own personal relationship with God that if God has not decreed a thing, regardless of whoever it happens to them, it does not have to happen to you. But we can get thrown in that pit like Daniel did and can say, well, because think about it. In that time, if they had that lion's den, that means other people were thrown in it, and them lions were already trained to perform the execution. So surely, and the people that devised the plan understood, if we could just get Daniel in this predicament, then the end that happened to everybody else would happen to him. But they didn't know Daniel's God. And you got to know in this day and time that people don't know your God. You know your God, that regardless of what has happened in someone else's life, I don't care what has devoured somebody else, it does not have to devour me, because why? We serve the Lord of the lifting.